let me establish an argument for the existence of a higher being, not God, but a higher being, something that is greater than humans. And I'm going to use science to establish my um, argument. And in me establishing my argument, I am going to be making a couple of assumptions, and assumptions here in bold block letters because I'm going to be using some scientific claims that are not verified to be true. So they themselves are just assumptions, some theories that are not proven to be true, right? So the first assumption, right, we're going to be assuming that the Big Bang did happen. So that is to say, the Big Bang theory is true. So we are granting that the Big Bang theory is true. So the Big Bang theory is telling us actually that the universe once existed as a point of singularity. It's telling us how the universe evolved from point of singularity to become something as big as it is today. All right. So it's not necessarily telling us where the universe originated from, which is a myth or an idea that many people have when they think of the Big Bang theory, right? Well, at least I also once believed that the Big Bang theory is just telling us where the universe originated from until I read up about it. Turned out that wasn't the case. So the Big Bang theory is telling us how the universe evolved from the Big Bang event to become something as big as it is today. So if the universe once existed as a point of singularity, so for you to understand what a point of singularity is, think of think of a marble, right? Think of a marble, the spherical, tiny, not tiny, but not too tiny, but the spherical object that we used to play with in primary. I don't know if you've played with marbles, but yeah, think of a marble. A marble inside is filled with matter, right? Inside the marble is matter. There is no space, it's not a hollow object. So a marble is not hollow. So a point of singularity is something like that, except that it is dense and it is hot. But you should get an idea of what a point of singularity is, or at least looked like. So the universe once existed as something like a marble before the Big Bang event happened. There was no space inside. And also, the second thing that I want us to touch on is the space time theorem, or rather theorems by Hawking and Penrose. So these are theorems that tell us that space and time have an origin. If you were to trace space and time as far back as you possibly can, you would arrive at a beginning, right? You would not go far back indefinitely. You would eventually arrive at a beginning. So it's telling us that there's a beginning for space, there's a beginning for time, there's a point of beginning for time, there's a point of beginning for space. It hasn't always existed, space. It hasn't always existed, time. So it is highly tied to the Big Bang event. So the space and time theorems is telling us that space started at the Big Bang and possibly time started at the Big Bang, because every event that is happening within the universe is time bound. So now, how does that make any sense? So I want you to think of a marble. Let's go back to our example of a marble, all right? Let's assume that, remember, we assumed that the Big Bang event happened. So now let's just say, let's go back to when the Big Bang happens. When the Big Bang happened, there was an explosion. And then the point of singularity, the tiny point of singularity started expanding, all right? So now imagine a marble expanding. As it expands, the matter inside it creates space. So remember, a marble is filled with matter. There is no space inside. But as it starts expanding, there starts to be space inside. And by the way, space is any any place where you can put something. Like right now, I'm sitting somewhere because there's space, all right? And my recording device is standing or sitting there because there is space, and you are sitting there because there is space, right? If there is no space, let's say you in the room, you fill a room with beds or something that's so much so that you don't have space to stand, you wouldn't be in the room because there would be no space, right? So it's something similar. A marble existed, or marble exists inside this matter. And similar thing with the universe. All right. The universe inside was filled with matter, but as it started expanding, it started creating space. So they are mathematical and philosophical grounds, but mostly mathematical proofs and evidence that point to the beginning of space, and it is highly tied to the Big Bang event. So now this is where it gets juicier. If space, and especially time, started at the Big Bang, this should tell us that before the Big Bang event happened, there was no time, but the universe already existed. The point of singularity, remember, these are all just assumptions. The universe already existed. The point of singularity was already there. That means matter was already there, right? But then the interesting thing is that quantum physics tells us that nothing can come from nothing. In order for there to be something, there must have been something that caused the something to be. I'm here because there was a person that got pregnant. They gave birth to me. And you're here because there's a person that got pregnant and gave birth to you. Your phone is here because there are people, or there's a person behind the creation of your phone, right? So basically, quantum physics is telling us that if there is something, there must have been something to cause the something to be. That something couldn't have come from nothing. So the same thing applied to the universe. If before the Big Bang event happened, the universe already existed, there must have been something that existed before the universe that must have caused the universe to be. And what is that something? Okay, we'll get back to the question. But this is the interesting point. Remember, I said the space time theorems, yeah, I keep saying theorem, it's theorems. The space time theorems tell us that the space and time began at the Big Bang, even though there's no solid evidence and proof that this is true, but it's a widely accepted theory in the space of science. So we're just going to assume, remember I said we're making a couple of assumptions here. Just going to assume that it is so. So if space and time, especially time, started at the Big Bang, so this means that whatever it is that caused the universe to be existed outside of time. Recently, I read about dimensions, all right? So there's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, even higher dimensions. So it turns out that we are, as people, as humankind, we are living in a 3D space. Any event and every event that happens within the universe happens in 3D space, right? And this is where time is just linear. And any event that happens outside of the 3D space, then time is nonlinear. So now if the thing or the being or that which caused the universe to be existed outside of time, then it must have existed outside of the 3D space, then it must have been higher than us, humans, or anything that happens within the universe, that is. So now the question is, if that thing is timeless, timeless, it exists outside of time. It is not bound by time. It is not bound by space. It is not bound by the laws of physics that we as humans are bound by. Then it must be something greater. It must be something bigger than humans. It must be something bigger than our thoughts, than our imaginations. It must be something more powerful than any human that ever walked this planet Earth or that ever existed in this universe. Number one, that thing must have been timeless, whatever it is that caused the time. And it being timeless, this is also an interesting part because there's always been a question of where did God come from? If God created everything, then who created God? Listen, remember, I said I'm not assuming and I'm not putting labels to the thing or the being or that which caused the universe to be. I'm just saying that which caused the universe to be, if it was timeless, then there couldn't have been a before because before is tied to time. Like right now, I'm sitting here, there is a before this moment, and there definitely is after this moment. So, what is that thing? So, the question that God, who created that thing, breaks now because there couldn't have been a before. So so this means that whatever it is that caused the universe to be has to be an uncaused cause of the universe. So now the question, I'm going to leave it to you to answer or infer what you think that is that caused the universe. Remember, it is not bound by time, it's not bound by space, it is not bound by the laws of physics. It exists in a different and a much higher dimension than us. We are constrained in the 3D space. But as you go high, and also there's a concept called quantum jumping in quantum physics. I didn't even know there are quantum or physicists that did not believe in this, like Schrodinger. But then there's a concept called quantum jumping. Quantum jumping is basically actually just jumping into different dimensions. So you jumping from a 3D space, you tapping into the 4D space, 5D and stuff. And it's a concept that is borrowed from quantum physics, and then it is applied at a human level. So quantum basically the spirit world, maybe it's existing in a fourth dimension, or but as you get into the fourth dimension and using Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, and if you to understand the fourth dimension, then you realize that time is actually something that does not exist the way it does in the third dimension. So time in the fourth dimension, for example, is just something that's not linear. We're just moving through slices of a number line. Let's say like it's a number line. Yeah, it's a lot of on physics, and it's a lot to wrap your head around. But then I'm just gonna leave it there. What do you think it is that caused the universe? Because it is not bound by time, definitely not bound by space. It has no before, it has no during, it has no after. Basically, it has no beginning. It has no end. That's what it means for something to be timeless. What could that be? Okay, one last thing. I'm reminded of something that I just read about a couple of days ago. Um, there's a lab in Switzerland. No, actually, I'm gonna make a separate video about this, but I'm just gonna leave you at that. Yeah. What is it? What do you think it is?